Hi folks, my name is Artem Pronichkin. I am program manager at Microsoft, and I'm here with Theo today, and we will be talking about Windows Server PayAsYouGo and Azure Arc Management. Hi Theo.
Thank you, Artem. Hi, everyone. My name is Theo. I'm a product manager here at Microsoft, and it's great to meet you all.
Thanks Theo. So let's start with Windows Server PayAsYouGo, and then we'll follow up with Windows Server Azure Arc Management Services. So what is Windows Server PayAsYouGo? Windows Server PayAsYouGo is simple inbox experience to license Windows Server, and it is consistent between on-prem and anywhere. And it is an alternative to traditional perpetual licensing in the sense that there are many existing options to license Windows Server, and we just add another option for those who prefer OpEx model instead of CapEx. It's enabled through Azure Arc, and by the way, it also includes Windows Server Azure Arc Management Services, which are otherwise included only if you have software assurance. So there are two ways to get Windows Server Arc Management Services. One is Windows Server PayAsYouGo, and another is software assurance. And this is the topic that Theo will be talking in a moment. So Windows Server PayAsYouGo is a subscription, which is a lot like Azure Local subscription, or what it was called before is Azure Stack HCI. So if you are familiar with how Azure Stack HCI licensed or Azure Local, this is the same thing. You pay monthly price and you have the right to use the software. Also, SQL Server, starting with SQL Server 2022, uses a similar model, so it's again nothing new, and it just makes another option to license Windows Server. There is a monthly price, and it's billed with Azure subscription. So if you have an Azure subscription and you use it for other services like Azure IaaS or Azure Defender or Azure Monitor, this is just another service that you subscribe to and you get billed for. And important to note what Windows Server PayAsYouGo is not. So it's not a replacement for perpetual licenses or subscription agreements. We just add a new option. We don't take away any existing options. It's not a solution to license Windows Server on Azure, because on Azure there is already a PayAsYouGo option that you can use, and again, we don't want to replace anything. So Windows Server PayAsYouGo with Azure Arc is available anywhere outside of Azure. It's maybe not the best option for long-running instances as of today. We plan to expand to more scenarios in the future, but today, if you try to run Windows Server PayAsYouGo for like a year or several years, you may find it maybe not the most economically efficient mechanism, but nothing stops you from using it for any duration you want. And most importantly, it's not set in stone. It's a new feature that we just introduced last year, and it keeps evolving, and we keep adding more scenarios and more options to this. So whenever you hear about any restrictions or limitations that exist today, don't assume that those limitations will stay forever. We are gradually working to improve the experience and remove restrictions over time. And if you want to learn more, there is a link at the bottom of the slide, and we will have it in the comments to the section later so that you can read full documentation about PayAsYouGo. How does it work? Here is a number of screens that illustrate how you can enable PayAsYouGo and how you experience it. So first of all, when you install Windows Server through Windows installation, Windows setup, there is a page where traditionally you could enter a product key to specify your license. And now there is another option that instead of specifying a product key, you can say, hey, I just want to use PayAsYouGo. And this is how you address the screen, and you don't have to enter the product key anymore, because product is what was used for traditional perpetual licenses. And if you want to use PayAsYouGo, you don't need any product key here. Then when you first sign up to Windows Server, you complete your setup or installation and your out-of-the-box experience. And then the Arc installation wizards pop up, and it asks you to sign it to your Azure Entra ID account, because it's a prerequisite to enable Azure Arc. We need to know your subscription ID and your permissions to your subscription. And then you specify the resource group for the Azure Arc resource. And then you have again the same option. You can say, I want to use PayAsYouGo to license this Windows Server. Or you can say, I don't want to use PayAsYouGo, I will just use a product key later. And if you say, I want to use a product key, then we just keep your license state intact and we don't license your server with PayAsYouGo. And after you complete this installation wizard, assuming you said, I want to use PayAsYouGo with Azure, then your machine becomes activated and licensed, and you can see in Windows Server system settings at the activation page, you can see that this Windows instance is activated with the digital license. And digital license is a unique feature of PayAsYouGo because, again, if you are using a different licensing option such as volume license or OEM or retail, that would be just a regular perpetual license based on a product key. And here, if you're using PayAsYouGo, that's a digital license which is not based on product key. And then when you go to Azure Portal and you check the properties of this resource of this machine in Azure Arc, you see two things. So one thing is that you can see the type of the license of this machine. And by the way, this is not limited to PayAsYouGo. You can see the type of license for any machine right now, right? So even if you have a different type of license, such as, again, volume license or retail or OEM, you will see that the machine is licensed with this particular channel, and you can see the license state. And then if you have PayAsYouGo enabled, or if you are eligible for PayAsYouGo and not still enabled for PayAsYouGo, you see this tile in the lower part of the screen which says PayAsYouGo, and it indicates the status of PayAsYouGo. So in this example, it says activated because PayAsYouGo is already enabled. And this is where you can click and go into details. And this is where you have a checkbox to enable PayAsYouGo, where you can enable it if it wasn't enabled previously through the mechanism that I showed before. Or you can disable it by unchecking this checkbox, and this is how you disable PayAsYouGo. So this settings page allows you to enable or disable PayAsYouGo or check the status of Windows Server PayAsYouGo for a particular Arc-enabled Windows Server. And we have also a scale experience where you can select multiple machines and enable or disable PayAsYouGo for all those machines at once. And if you prefer API or command line tools or some automation or maybe a script, there is a new group of properties in Azure Resource Manager for Arc-enabled Windows Server, where you can check the license profile. And inside the license profile, there is a number of properties, such as license status and license channel. This indicates where the machine is licensed and how exactly it's licensed. These are the properties that we saw in the machine properties on the previous screen on Azure Portal. And then you can see the status of PayAsYouGo specifically, which is subscription status. So by default, it says disabled because by default, of course, Windows Server PayAsYouGo is not enabled. And if you want to enable it through API, you can flip it to enabled. Or if you check the properties of the machine which is already enrolled into Windows Server PayAsYouGo, you can check that subscription status is enabled. And of course, there are other properties as well which you can explore, and you can make additional scripting decisions based on that. There are a few ways to enable PayAsYouGo, as we discussed previously, and there are a few prerequisites. First of all, you need Windows Server 2025, as this is a unique feature which is new to Windows Server 2025. You need Standard or Data Center Edition, and the machine must not be activated. Because if the machine is already activated, we assume that you already have a license, and you don't need another license. So if you want to enable PayAsYouGo on an existing machine, you need to make sure that the machine is not currently activated. Then you connect to Azure Arc. And when you enable PayAsYouGo, first 7 days are free per machine. This is our trial period, so you can try it out or you can see how it works. And if you are not happy with how it works, you can disable it within those 7 days, and then you are not required to pay anything. And after 7 days, if you haven't disabled it, we'll start billing your per machine for Windows Server PayAsYouGo. And a new feature in Windows Insider builds coming soon on June 1st is that if you enable Windows Server PayAsYouGo on Windows Insider builds, which are pre-release builds not supported in production, available for evaluation or exploring new features, then Windows Server PayAsYouGo will be free, just as any Windows Server Insider builds. Right? So Windows Insider builds, they don't require any license, so now you will be able to enable PayAsYouGo and keep using Insider builds with PayAsYouGo without paying anything. If you want to disable PayAsYouGo, there are a few ways to do this. So the most obvious option is just to uncheck the checkbox that I showed on the previous screen, which says I want to use PayAsYouGo on this machine. So if you uncheck this checkbox and press confirm, then this will immediately disable PayAsYouGo and we will stop billing you for that. Or you can delete Azure resource. So if you just delete the whole Windows Server resource from Azure, from Arc-enablement, then it also will disable all the paid services that are associated with this Azure resource. And this is how you can also disable PayAsYouGo. So if you do either of those options, disable the checkbox or delete Arc source, that will almost immediately, within 1 hour, disable PayAsYouGo, and you will not be billed for anything else. And the digital license that you have on your machine will still expire within 30 days. So don't be surprised that the machine remains activated for a little longer, but you're not being billed for anything since you disabled PayAsYouGo. There are a few ways that somebody may think is a good way to disable PayAsYouGo, but in fact it's not, because it doesn't disable billing immediately. So one option is if you just stop the machine or shut down the machine or pause it, then from the Azure Arc perspective, we don't know what happened to this machine, right? Because it just disappeared and we don't see it anymore. So we assume that, hey, maybe you had some hiccup with your internet connection, maybe something went wrong with your network configuration, your proxy server, something else. We assume that maybe the machine is still running and you're still using it. So we don't stop billing in this case. If you just uninstall Arc-Agent, same thing. It just disappeared from Azure Portal and we don't know why, because you just terminated this channel between Azure Arc and your machine. Or if you block communications, maybe you configure proxy or firewall. Again, if you didn't disable PayAsYouGo and machine that just disappeared, we don't know what happened, we keep billing for it. Or if you just delete the VM or decommission physical server, and again, we don't know what happened, we just assume that machine is still there, it's still running, and maybe there's just a temporary hiccup with internet connectivity, and in this case, we will keep billing for 30 days. If we haven't seen this machine for 30 days, and it never reconnected in 30 days to Azure Arc, then we think, okay, maybe the machine is gone and it will no longer reappear. Maybe something happened to it, maybe it was deleted or removed or deleted or something else. So after 30 days, it will stop billing. But for 30 days, we assume that machine is still running, and you may still reconnect within 30 days. Again, if you had some issues with connectivity, that's fine. And the machine remains activated for 30 days. And for 30 days, you can reconnect and disconnect as you please, and you can go offline, you can shut down, you can restart. It doesn't impact the state of your license. License remains in place and the machine remains activated. And if it wasn't online for 30 days, this is when we stop billing, and this is when the digital license will eventually expire. Because again, digital license, if it's not renewed, it's only good for 30 days. And if the machine was disconnected from the internet or from Azure Arc, then the digital license will expire in 30 days. So there are a few options how you can switch from PayAsYouGo to perpetual license and back. So if you want to go from PayAsYouGo to perpetual license, that's very straightforward and very easy. So first thing you do is you disable PayAsYouGo through one of the options that I explained previously. Namely, you can just uncheck the checkbox in the machine properties in Azure Arc, or you can disable it through API or some other mechanism. And then you install a product key and you activate with this product key and you're done. This is how you switch from PayAsYouGo to perpetual license, especially if you deploy the machine and you plan to use it, for example, for a couple days or a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, that's fine. And then you figured, I want to keep your machine for longer, and then you want to switch to perpetual license. So if you want to go the other way around, if you want to switch from perpetual license to PayAsYouGo, this is a not straightforward operation. It's not officially supported yet. It can be done if you just uninstall the product key and make sure that the machine is unactivated, and then you activate it through PayAsYouGo. So this is technically possible. And we want to introduce more options for that. So keep your eye on announcement in Windows Server blog or documentation. In the near future, we will introduce more options to switch back and forth, and it will be more straightforward. The price for Azure PayAsYouGo is consistent with Azure, and the terms and the conditions are consistent with Azure. So first of all, you have Standard Edition and Data Center Edition at the same price, like on Azure. There's no dependency on host or guest version, and there are no virtualization rights. So you pay for each machine, physical or virtual, independently, again, just like on Azure. You get new version rights. This includes future versions of Windows Server, so whenever a new version of Windows Server comes out, you can use it, include it into the price of Windows Server PayAsYouGo, and no changes in pricing or your billing. There are no CALs required, no client access license, and the price is per CPU core, physical or virtual CPU core. We don't count logical CPU cores. And the price is $33.58 per CPU core per month, and again, this is consistent with Azure. What does it mean consistent with Azure? So imagine you deploy 2 VMs on Azure. On first machine, you say, I want to use Windows Server license from Azure, and this is the price you pay for it. $33.58 per month. This is exactly the same price as you would pay for Windows Server PayAsYouGo if you deploy a machine anywhere else outside of Azure. And on Azure, if you say I want to use Azure Hybrid benefits, this will bring your cost from Azure to zero. So again, that's the difference between a virtual machine on Azure, which is deployed with Windows Server license or without Windows Server license. And this is the same exact price that you will be billed for Windows Server PayAsYouGo if you deploy PayAsYouGo on premises or on third-party clouds. So this is our Azure consistent price for Windows Server license with PayAsYouGo. Where would you use Windows Server PayAsYouGo? There are a few scenarios where I anticipate that it would make most sense. First of all is the burst, like temporary seasonal workloads. Imagine if your host runs Windows Server Standard and it has 2 licenses for Windows Server, or maybe it's an older version of Windows Server, so you don't have a license for a new version, and you just want to add another VM running Windows Server 2025, or maybe a couple VMs. That makes perfect sense to use Windows Server PayAsYouGo, because it will not require you to use any virtualization rights. Or if you have a physical server where, again, you don't need virtualization rights. For example, you have physical domain controllers or physical databases. Or maybe you have a Hyper-V server which runs VDI or Linux workloads where you don't need virtualization rights. So those are target scenarios where it makes the most sense to use Windows Server PayAsYouGo. And again, more scenarios and more options are coming soon. So one of the examples is, again, when you have a Windows Server host running Windows Server 2022 standard, so you don't have rights to run Windows Server 2025 in your machines. And imagine you have already 2 machines running, so you don't have any virtualization rights left, and maybe you have a couple of Linux VMs that don't consume virtualization rights. So if you want to deploy a new VM, let's say Windows Server 2025, that's a great option to use PayAsYouGo because it doesn't require virtualization rights, and you just add 1 machine, and you pay just for what you're using in this machine. So if this machine uses, let's say, 2 virtual CPUs, you just pay for 2 CPU cores. If it uses 4 or 8 CPUs inside the virtual machine, then you pay only for those 4 or 8 CPU cores for Windows Server PayAsYouGo, regardless of how many CPUs your hosts have. Another example, as I mentioned, is bare metal host, where you may license the host with Windows Server 25 with PayAsYouGo, and then you run VMs which don't require the host license, such as Windows 11 for VDI, or Linux, which again doesn't require the Windows Server license from the host. So that was it for Windows Server PayAsYouGo. And now back to you, Theo, for Windows Server Azure Arc Management Services. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Artem, presenting Windows Server Azure Arc Management Services. This should all sound very familiar to the folks who attended Ignite last year. But as a recap, Windows Server Azure Arc Management Services are a set of services that are available to you at no additional cost, as long as you have either software assurance or PayAsYouGo, which is what Artem just covered. So you may be already familiar with Azure Update Manager, Azure Change Tracking and Inventory, and Azure Policy Guest Machine. So I won't go over those, but normally those services would cost you around $5 to $6 per VM per month. But now those services with software assurance or PayAsYouGo, you get all of these services and the new ones that I'm about to show you for no additional cost at all. Starting off with Windows Admin Center in Azure for Arc. It is an essential tool for managing your Arc-enabled Windows Server machines. Using it, you can essentially securely manage your hybrid machines from anywhere without ever needing a VPN, a public IP address, or other inbound connectivity to your machine. So let's see it in action. Those of you who have been using us since our inception, thank you so much. But with this product tool, you get the management configuration, troubleshooting and maintenance functionality for managing your Arc-enabled servers in the Azure portal. Windows Server infrastructure and workload management no longer requires you to establish a line of sight or remote desktop in. It can all be done natively from the Azure portal. So here you'll see me open up a couple of tools. We have the Server Manager, Device Manager, right, Hyper-V Manager, and most of the legacy Microsoft Management Console tools. And that's Windows Admin Center in Azure for Arc. Moving on to remote support. With this tool, you can allow a Microsoft support professional to help solve your support case faster by permitting access to your device remotely and performing limited troubleshooting and repair. We know how troublesome and tedious it can be to resolve issues, so we have done our best to streamline this experience for you. In this demo, you can enable this feature by granting consent, and you can control the level of access and the duration of access as well. Once it's enabled, Microsoft support gets just-in-time limited time access to your device over a secure, audited, and compliant channel. You can reconfigure the access level and set the expiration at any time. Of course, you can revoke access and view the detailed transcripts of all the executed operations as well. With remote support, you gain the ability to improve the speed to resolution, as Microsoft support no longer needs to arrange a meeting with you for troubleshooting. Moving on to Network HUD. We know that running and maintaining a network for your business applications is a hard job. So with Network HUD, it intercepts any networking health, diagnostics, and operational issues to proactively identify and remediate those issues on your behalf, specifically only for Windows Server 2025 clusters right now. With it, you can view the health faults generated by the network cluster and view it all within Windows Admin Center. And of course, once this does become publicly available, it will be a tool natively in the Azure portal as well. To find out more details in this demo, we'll double click on the top fault health. And in this example, Network HUD has detected an inbox driver issue. So we'll fix this issue by upgrading your adapter driver. And with that, that is how essentially Network ATC and Network HUD combines to provide you with a seamless experience when it comes to host networking on your Windows Server 2025 cluster. Moving on, we have our best practices assessment tool, which as its name implies, that will continuously scan your Windows Server and evaluate the configurations based on Windows best practices. It assesses the server environment in the following areas that you see: server baseline, server security, Hyper-V, and much more. So assessments will be ran automatically at a scheduled frequency, but can also be ran at any time of your choosing. It just takes 3 to 4 hours to do so. It will collect and analyze your server data to generate a list of issues for you to address, along with remediation guidance and best practices to improve the performance of your server. Each recommendation has suggested actions, context, prioritization guidance on features such as, deploying your application, software updates, and operating systems. The results of the assessments are uploaded to your Logs Analytics workspace and then displayed here, as you can see, in a visual format within the Azure portal. And last but not least, we have Azure Site Recovery configuration, which will essentially walk you through creating a Vault, Hyper-V site, replication policy, and then install Azure Site Recovery on your behalf. It's important to note that this tool is simply the configuration part. Azure Site Recovery is a separate paid service that you will have to pay outside of PayGo and your software assurance Azure benefits like license. So, as I said, it will connect and associate the agents with the replication policy, Vault, and Hyper-V site, so you don't have to do any of that manual configuration yourself, since it tracks where it is. Once you do have this prepared, you can then begin enabling the site recovery itself. As I said before, once you are past this step, this is the normal Azure Site Recovery tool, which costs approximately $25 per VM per month. However, with ASR enabled, it will manage and orchestrate replication, failover, and failback on on-premises and Azure virtual machines, of course running Azure Arc. In the future, we plan to support not only Hyper-V machines, but also VMware VMs as well. Right now, this tool is currently in public preview, and so once we get the work done for that, it should hopefully be on its way to GA. All right, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. That concludes our presentation on PayAsYouGo and Windows Server Azure Arc Management Services. Please do check out this QR code and give us your feedback.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching this session. I appreciate you being here and hope to see you again, and please enjoy the next session. Thank you. Bye.